It's just one of those, situations that we all have to accept, going forward in the world that we live in today, because, in essence, everything is potentially under attack.
Hello and welcome to the Securing Your Law Firm's Reputation podcast series, hosted on law.com and sponsored by Ivionics. I'm your host, Scott Ferguson. In the first episode of this series, called Identifying Cyber Risk and How to Get Started, Ivionics CEO Paul Sperry and Wayne Marino, the company's Director of Cybersecurity, sit down with moderator Mike Andrevet to discuss how cyber threats are everywhere these days, and law firms are no exception. Paul and Wayne also discuss how identifying risk is critical to understanding where law firms and their leaders need to start their cyber journey. Let's join their conversation.
Hello, and welcome to part one of our podcast series. Today, identifying cyber risk and how to get started in assessing that risk. Our program is sponsored by the technology experts at Ivionics. I'm your moderator, Mike Andrevet. Paul Sperry joins me. He's the CEO of Ivionics, and Wayne Marino is the company's Director of Cybersecurity. Hi, Paul. Hi, Wayne. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, this is Paul. Thanks for having us, Mike. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here, Mike. Thank you very much.
Paul, let's start with you. At Ivionics, you specialize in helping lawyers and law firms. Can you tell us a little bit why law firms are particularly vulnerable to cyber intrusions and cyber risk?
Sure. So in my opinion, there's really, two reasons why, that's the case. And the first is the value of the information that law firms contain. They deal in the document world. They have highly sensitive information within those documents that really become a target for bad actors. And second is the overall security posture. Surprisingly, even at this point, there's many firms that just haven't taken security serious enough, and that in itself also makes themselves an easy target. Implementing security programs is expensive. We all know that. A lot of firms, I like to say, play the ignorant card in saying that we really can't afford to do it right, and they minimize the likelihood of a security event happening. It won't happen to us. We hear that many times, and it always frustrates me when I get that, because it's going to happen. That's really the truth of the matter. Others, that will come back to me and say, hey, we've migrated all our data to the cloud, so we really have no risk. Or I've purchased cyber insurance and I don't need to do anything else. And they're really kind of pushing off the responsibility for protecting that data to third parties, which really is not a good strategy, and something that we'll touch on in today's conversation.
Right. Wayne, is it safe to say that law firms typically exist in a digital environment in which their clients are demanding, more know-how and more attention to this cyber risk?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer to that is yes, but law firms, they typically operate in hybrid environments, right? At least in today's day and age. And what that means is that you have assets in physical form, you have it in the cloud infrastructure, you have it in digital form. It's in a lot of different areas. And law firms don't typically understand, what the risk is in relation to all those different areas. So this is where you see, the clients coming in and saying, hey, have you thought of this? Hey, have you thought of that? And those typically come in the form of security questionnaires, right? Those security questionnaires are going to ask you, how do you operate your company's security from the top down? It may ask you about, your technical controls that you have. Have you evaluated your vendors? All those comprehensive questions that they ask are trying to get an understanding of what your security posture is for your whole company. So the idea here is that, we want to go with a comprehensive approach for law firms. And that may kind of entail like maybe moving towards like a zero trust architecture, where we marry like, security for your physical environment versus your cloud environment, and make sure that they're strengthened with the security between those two environments. But it's not just that, it may also have to move into different cybersecurity frameworks as well. We've seen clients come in and say, hey, listen, do you have SOC 2 compliance, or do you have ISO 27001 compliance? So there's different avenues and different things that we want to recommend and basically customized for for the client to make sure that they're getting the best protection and their clients feel safe.
Just as sort of as I'm hearing you describe the environment, lawyers are very good at practicing law, and some of the questions that you're, playing back for our audience here sound so sophisticated. I wonder if in many cases, even at larger law firms, do they have people in-house who sort of recognize, the potential for disruption and cyber risk?
Some law firms, yes, they may have people that are specialized in that type of law, maybe like data breach notification laws or privacy laws and things that may explain. But same type of concept, right? Like the idea here is that lawyers normally cite different case law in their when they go to law, when they're practicing. Same thing with cybersecurity. We're doing the same thing, right? Like we don't want to just invent cybersecurity. There's tried and true forms that are out there, and this is where we get into security frameworks, and that's what we reference to make sure that we're doing those things properly. And this way we can see as we go through that we're moving the sticks forward as we go along, and we're not going backwards.
So interesting. Paul, do you ever get clients who come to you after the breach has already occurred?
Unfortunately, yes. Probably the worst time to pick up a client because they're already they're already in a tough spot.
Yeah.
So you have to deal with the breach remediation, and that can be costly depending on the extent of the breach. But even after that, after they've gone through the pain of dealing with fixing the problems, is then they have to really focus in on shoring up their overall security posture. How do you prevent it from happening again? How do you make sure other like events don't occur, and so on down the line? And that's on top of the fact that there's been some type of disruption already to either the firm's clients. There's a loss of billable time, there's a potential reputation damage that's caused in these events. So there's a lot that goes into it, and you're typically not dealing with a happy customer at that time. So we love to always get a new customer. We'll never say no for the most part, but usually not the ideal time to pick up the new customer. But we do the best we can and work with them, understanding what they're going through and trying to really kind of get them back on track as quickly as we possibly can. As I mentioned before, incidents are they're going to happen. You really just need to do the best you can when they do happen, and that the response is as quickly and as accurately in ensuring things up as you possibly can be. One of the most important policies, security policies that's out there is a incident response policy that kind of steps you through, what should you do when an event occurs. To my point earlier, those that have, cyber insurance and depend on that, so many firms have said to me, well, I'm just going to reach out and I'm going to call my cyber insurance provider. And in many cases, that's probably the worst situation you can do is, making them aware of a situation that doesn't really need to, invoke the insurance organization as a whole, because they're going to bring their team of experts in. There's going to be cost associated with that. There's going to be increases in your policies, all for things that you may be able to kind of work through in a very, short period of time with the right team. To your question before is, a lot of firms today, the bigger firms pretty much all have a CISO, a certified information security officer. And those that don't have a full-time CISO on staff to assist with these types of initiatives, we'll use what we call a virtual CISO, kind of a part-time person that usually comes from a reputable MSSP, a managed security service provider. Those are organizations like ours that specialize in security. And there's a really significant difference between an MSSP and an MSP. And the managed solutions or service providers that are out there have stepped into the world of security, but most don't have the experience. And I like to say they tend to leave their fingerprints at the crime scene more than they solve problems. So kind of as a selfish plug is, if you're out there and you don't have a go-to person when a security event occurs, feel free to put my cell phone in your favorites and reach out to me if there's ever an issue that you need us for. So
I think we'll put you on speed dial.
There you go. I love it.
So, just generally, Wayne, maybe you can tackle this. How can you help a law firm sort of just get its arms around, not only protecting itself, but maybe more to the point, protecting the client's, priceless data that they have in the law firm system?
You need to start somewhere, right? And I kind of touched on this earlier. And getting under a security framework is probably a good step to making sure that you're working towards a goal line. And with that, there's products out there that you can use to help manage that. And there's something that's called GRC, it's governance, risk, and compliance. And you could choose a framework with inside that. It's kind of like software, and this will help you manage your policies and your controls. And what does that mean is policies are things that we tell our company that we're going to do. It tells our employees, it tells ourselves, it tells upper management, it tells your executives. This is what the posture for the company is going to be. So that helps for one, making sure that we're taking into consideration this priceless data. And these are the set of things like the kind of like the tone of the company on how we're planning to secure these things. And then the controls are the other portion, which is, well, not only do we want to, tell these, employees how to do things, but we also want to put things in place that make sure these things are going to happen. Some of the ways that that might happen is that we might put in like MDM, right? It's probably mobile device management, where, probably with your phone and other people's phones, they have to enroll it. And this way, if you lost your phone on a taxi, we can go and erase it remotely. And these are what we call technical controls to make sure that we could, secure our assets and our data, even when things go wrong, even when people make mistakes. And MDM is just one example of that. But there's like, endpoint detection and response, which means like we can isolate threats, or, there might be application whitelisting or application control, where we can basically say you can run this application on your machine, or you cannot run this other type of application on your machine. And all these things in conjunction create like a defense in depth approach, where even if an attacker were to get through the first step, well, we got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 controls and backup behind it, so that it makes it much more difficult for an attacker to get into the organization that way. Attackers typically go for the weakest link. They're looking for those companies that don't do much, that aren't doing the things that they shouldn't be doing. But don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that just because you have a whole bunch of comprehensive security policies that they're not going to still target you. So that's why I'd recommend normally going with a framework, looking at those policies, looking at those controls, and making sure that we have a good comprehensive solution.
Well, Paul, building on that information, can you talk a little bit about the structure that you use and Ivionics use to not only assess the threat, but then develop the plan that a law firm can not only implement, right, but maybe as important, understanding and gaining the buy-in from the staff and the lawyers who probably, or maybe at least, have different priorities?
Sure, and I think the buy-in is usually the toughest part, So, but starting, with the plan, I like to say every firm is different, no matter how similar they appear on the surface, and there's no perfect plan, and there's no plan that works for all. When we start these conversations with our clients, many of them are, hey, we're just like ABC law firm, whatever you did for them, do the same and put a plan together, for us. Just cut and paste it and send it over and we're good. So I wish it was that easy
Right.
because there's a lot of work that goes into the formulation of a plan. I mean, as I think we mentioned earlier, is just security is about protecting information, and it makes things more cumbersome. And it's just one of those situations that we all have to accept going forward in the world that we live in today, because in essence everything is potentially under attack. So anyway, when it comes to the plan, the first step is always getting management to realize that they need help with this. Many times there's people within the firm that feel that they are capable of doing it. Most time that's not the case, and there are CISOs and others that are qualified security experts that can do it. But most of the time, they really need to go and find outside help to work with them through the process. And then it's getting the commitment, to actually implementing a security program that's aligned to the firm's risk tolerance. Every firm has a different risk tolerance. Some, can't afford to have anything out there. A breach would be detrimental to the firm. Others are becoming accepting of it because of the world today is every other newspaper you pick up, there's an identifiable breach, in the headlines. So the plan really starts with the education, getting the stakeholders educated about the risk, the approach, the budget, the objectives. And as we mentioned earlier, the buy-in is key, and the buy-in starts from the first early conversations and making sure that everybody's on the same page with what needs to be done. And then it's the effort of putting the plan together, which is a collaborative approach, between the security consultants and the firm's governance, compliance, and technology staff, those that are going to participate in that. I think it is important just to mention that, getting the right people, there's a lot of individuals and firms that classify themselves as security consultants. And there is an importance to the different certifications that are out in the market today. Wayne happens to be a CISSP, which is a Certified Information Security something. I lost. I'll let
Sounds
you.
impressive.
Yeah, losing all the acronyms here today. So I got to have that third cup of coffee.
Well, in just the last couple of seconds that we have, at the end of the day, in helping a law firm assess and address cyber risk and cyber threats, what in your view is success? Either of you or both of you?
I can take this, Paul. So, I mean, for me, and the way that I see success for a law firm is that getting the buy-in for upper management is really important because they set the tone for the rest of the company. I mean, the big takeaway here, which would be, hopefully that there's no data breaches, but that's hard to quantify sometimes. But if they understand, what their risk is, they have a good remediation plan. They're thoughtful in their approach and making sure that they can follow through with their execution, and just making sure that that there's a plan and a budget in place to address these things. That to me, that is success, because they're acknowledging and moving forward with the direction of securing this. Every company has different budgets, different money allocation, different abilities, right? So the most that you can hope is that they're aware of that security threats and the risk that's to their organization, and that they're making proactive choice to mitigate those things.
So important and just fascinating conversation. Gentlemen, we're at the end of part one of our discussion, but we're actually just getting started. Next time, we'll discuss what law firm actions law firm leaders should take to adopt a credible security framework for their law firms. For more insights, visit Ivionics.com. That's Ivionics.com. I'm Mike Andrevet. We'll see you next time.
That's all the time we have for this discussion. Tune into other episodes in this series to learn more about cyber risk and cybersecurity. I'm your host, Scott Ferguson. Thanks for listening.